So I have a very special guest with me here today. This is Karen. She has been working with me for the past 3 months. And in the interim of those 3 months, she actually had a beautiful baby boy named James. He is adorable. I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Okay, hi, my name is Karen. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana, and my husband and I welcomed our first baby, a son, on August 15th. Um, Currently staying at home, but we'll probably go back to work. My background's in nursing, but not sure about the timing.
What did your diet typically consist of prior to working together?
It was pretty much the standard American diet. A lot of processed foods. Breakfast, a lot of times cereal, although sometimes I did do oatmeal. I was all about during the pregnancy what was quick. I had a very high appetite and would definitely go for like frozen pizza or more pre-prepared kind of foods. Went out to eat a decent amount as well.
You are not the first person I've worked with that went towards the peanut butter and jelly, the mac and cheese, the
Yeah.
prepared soups, egg sandwich and cheese. So,
Yeah.
so you had been plant-based at one point, but you found it way too challenging to stick with, right?
Yes. So it's like in my head, I had the knowledge that I thought that plant-based was the healthiest, but I really took a turn for the worse. I had really bad morning sickness my first trimester. And so at that point, I was just eating anything that I would tolerate. So that's kind of what really got me on the processed route with, because I was living off of like crackers and sugared cereals and then from there, just never really got back into a good eating pattern.
Until now, why don't
Until now,
you
yes.
give us a preview of what a typical day's worth of meals looks like now?
Now I usually start my day with oatmeal, but with your help, I've got inspiration. Now my oatmeal is kind of gotten a little facelift. I got beans in there. I've got cauliflower, sometimes zucchini in there as well, and berries and flaxseed. And then trying to do a salad a day, not always doing that, but trying to like get in greens. I like a lot of soups. Every once in a while, something with bean pasta, a lot of potatoes, veggies, that sort of thing.
I love that you touched on the challenge with your salads because this is not super common, but I would say that a lot of people coming from the standard American diet style of eating, like you had, trying to switch to this giant salad with lots of raw vegetables, like you're kind of lost. You don't really know how to make it palatable. But we found a number of different ways that you were more suited to eating salad on a regular basis. So things like adding different dressings that you concocted at home with various whole foods, and you found that adding a crunch, something crunchy to the salad was really helpful. So any sort of cabbage or bok choy. She also found that finely chopping her salad was really helpful. You get a little taste of each bite of each ingredient when you do that, as opposed to getting like a huge chunk of spinach and then a huge chunk of red cabbage. Like that's not appetizing. And you also enjoyed your pico de gallo. That was a big one for me when I was pregnant. It was always this giant Mexican salad first thing for breakfast.
How all those different strategies really changed my view of what a salad was and what you could go beyond the idea of what a salad was I had before. So that was extremely helpful getting those different strategies.
So, how are your cravings for processed and animal foods now compared to the initial weeks on the program?
Oh, night and day different, I would say. It's just really gotten ingrained over these past 3 months. And so maybe something might look good, but then if I seriously think about eating it, I wouldn't, just because that's not what I eat anymore. While yes, maybe there are still some cravings, I feel like not cravings enough that I would actually give into them.
We started working together at the beginning of her third trimester, and you would think that at this point she would be the most ravenous and the most cravings overwhelmed. And now she's breastfeeding and dealing with recovering from birth. So these are naturally points where our society is like, oh, well, you've got to have your ice cream and you've got to have your recovery cookies and you've got to have, or what are they called? Breastfeeding cookies they sell in
Oh
like
yeah,
Target. Oh,
for a thing.
yeah, birthing cookies. So it's such baloney that you need to go down that route or you have to have junk food when you're pregnant.
Yeah, I feel like as I've gotten more used to it, I haven't needed to rely on the like sweet snacks as much, or the
Mhm.
idea that, you always need a dessert or something like that. But enjoying meals and enjoying fruit is nature's candy.
So I was really impressed that I always forget that you were a soda drinker, and her cravings for the soda and the fast food that she was very accustomed to and the sweets had significantly diminished by the second and third weeks working together. So that's really doable. Most people think they're going to feel deprived and they're going to be craving for the rest of their life, and their new foods are never going to taste as delicious or as pleasurable as their old foods, but it's totally doable. Everything adapts with time. What was your primary motivation behind making the plant-based transition, and what results were you hoping to achieve?
I prior to starting to work with you was just feeling really guilty, just about the way I was eating and feeling as though I was gaining too much weight during pregnancy. Of course, a certain amount is normal, but I was kind of above the suggested amount. Um, and so just not really liking that in my head. I knew that plant-based was the way to go, but my actions didn't align with what my knowledge. Um, but also realizing that I needed help and support, thinking that, I've tried it before, hasn't really worked, but, I really want to make it work because it's not just me now, it's also my son. And, I was nourishing him when he was in the womb, but I also really wanted to breastfeed. So it's like, I've got a long time that I'm, nourishing this baby. I want to do right by him. And so, that was probably the main motivation was him.
Your child also was a higher weight than you were comfortable with as well, and as your doctor was comfortable with. So that was another reason for coming to the
Yeah.
conclusion that you needed some assistance with this. You were also hoping to making sure you could have a smooth recovery and birth and such. But you really wanted to develop that ideal healthy lifestyle to start your family off right. I really respected that. I thought that was a great way to look at things. But you also had this family history of autoimmune problems and melanoma and dementia. These are all great reasons, right? Like this is your why to keep going long term. Like, yes, you wanted to do this for your baby, you did it for your baby, but what's going to keep you going is knowing that now you're going to stay full of vigor and vitality long into your elderly years and continue watching this beautiful thing develop throughout your life, and maybe a second and third, and who knows how many children after that. So, what noticeable changes have you experienced in your health thus far? Mental, physical, emotional?
Like you touched on earlier, having that mentally, that peace of mind and just greater confidence was a game changer, I would say. Just not only just the absence of feeling guilty, but feeling as though I'm fueling myself and my son and setting a good example for him and my family, setting us up for the best quality of life that we can have. Losing weight was another thing. Just feeling so much better in my own body and being able to not too much longer postpartum fit into clothes is great. I also noticed a decrease in swelling, like in my face and in my hands during pregnancy, and felt like I had more energy and felt like my sleep quality also improved. I think from the diet change, but then we also talked about time restricted eating and having that time for my food to be digested and for my gut to rest. So it was different as well.
Yeah, because you were taking daily naps when we first started working together, like several of them, right? Not just a little one. And then you were in bed for 10 to 12 hours, right? During the evening.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you were incredibly fatigued on that standard American diet, especially growing a human inside of you. It was like tenfold.
Yeah, my hips also started hurting less as well, which helped me sleep better.
Yeah, I noted that as well. That's a big one when you're pregnant, huh?
Yeah, definitely.
So Karen was actually taking Unisom regularly, and you knew I was going to bring this up because I am so proud of you for getting off of this. I used to use Unisom regularly also, but when I got pregnant, I thought it just did not sit well with me, and now she sleeps perfectly well without a sleep aid, and she gets a regular, more typical amount of sleep per night as opposed to the 10 to 12 hours. And she's not napping at all during the day, even when she was still pregnant at the end of her pregnancy. These foods just do a wonderful job of perking you back up and making you feel like you can take on your day. She lost 16 pounds in the first 9 weeks. Remember, she was pregnant in her 3rd trimester when this happened. So that is pretty phenomenal. And this isn't like overnight. This is a very gradual, very healthful 9 weeks worth of losing weight just by eating the proper foods at the proper time frames. She was not overly exercising. She wasn't doing a ton of strength training like we had hoped by the end of our time working together. So daily walking, 45 minutes a day was her go-to. So altogether, she had lost 40 pounds from day 1 to post-birth. So granted, she lost a baby in there. So following her birth, and this is very common in women, whether it's a full-blown postpartum depression or a lower degree of the baby blues, she had in fact experienced significant baby blues, and there was a lot of crying and a lot of feelings of uncertainty and just feeling scared and lots of fear around being a new mom and trying to take care of this child and just being sad all the time. That's a very complicated situation when you're trying to figure out how to take care of a new child. So I'm not trying to purport that these foods are magical and, you know, she should have never had the baby blues because she had fixed her diet. Like, regardless of what we do with our diet, sometimes things just happen and there's not a whole lot we can do about it. One last thing. She finally became regular. There is nothing more frustrating than being a pregnant woman who is constipated all the time. And it is so unbelievably common in America. So I had to divulge that detail. If you find yourself struggling with this transition or losing those excess pounds, make sure you click my link in the description box below and schedule a free 45-minute consultation with me so we can get started on your health journey. How do you feel your pregnancy experience and outcomes have changed as a result of going exclusively whole food plant-based mid-pregnancy?
I think it's made a really big difference. Just in terms of, like you had mentioned that he did measure really large at 20 weeks. And so I had to get a repeat ultrasound at 34 weeks just to make sure that he didn't need to be delivered via C-section if, you know, there were concerns about his shoulders getting stuck. And so, but thankfully the 34 week, he was still on the larger end, but like not enough to need a C-section. I'm not saying it's all from the diet, but I do think that one of the risk factors of a larger baby is excessive weight gain during pregnancy. So I felt like you said, things that are in my control, that was in my control, you know, making sure I'm staying at a healthy weight during pregnancy. So I felt like I was making a positive difference there. And just his nourishment, he only dropped, it was like 4 or 5% body weight from birth to when we went home from the hospital, which they said was pretty low. And then he was, you know, breastfeeding, he was back up to birth weight within a week, which the pediatrician was also really happy about. You know, he's thriving and doing well and just had his 1 month checkup and, you know, is really healthy and growing. And then I feel like my health is better because of it. I think that although I did have baby blues, potentially postpartum depression, I think if I hadn't been in this lifestyle, it would have been a lot worse. If this new way of eating hadn't been so ingrained. And, you know, I had frozen soup, I had frozen oatmeal waiting for me when I got home to be able to jump back into this way of eating, despite going through, you know, a hard time emotionally, mentally, physically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Karen also brought food with her to the hospital, and she was able to find plenty of healthful options waiting there for her as well through the cafeteria. So ultimately, you had a very healthy baby boy, and that's what our objective was. So how was your milk supply responding to this diet and your baby's temperament?
Milk supply has been great. I did have breastfeeding struggles, but it was more on his end with getting latched and had a tongue tie. But in terms of supply, it's been great. When I was in the hospital, in fact, my milk came in, you know, the transition from the colostrum to like the regular milk, and the lactation consultant was like, wow, for your first baby, you know, having that come in 2 days before I even went home. She's like, that's great. sometimes it can take a little bit longer. And so yeah, supply is great and not concern, which is, I'm really thankful for. We've gone to a few breastfeeding support meetings where you're able to like weigh your baby before and after eating, and he gets good full feedings in. So very thankful for that.
That's so great. That's a huge weight off your mind. So you feel that his temperament isn't like he's not super colicky, or there's nothing to be concerned about.
He is a kind of a fussy baby, but with the pediatrician, there's no reason to believe that has anything to do with what I'm eating or my milk or anything like that. So he is a little on the fussier end though.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. So many women have to figure out how to deal with really colicky babies, and sometimes I feel like diet has a lot to do with it. When they're out of control, like screaming and crying nonstop and not sleeping, and just it's one thing to be a fussy baby, it's another thing to be a colicky baby, I feel.
Yeah, colicky is kind of another level.
Yes. What were the major challenges taking on this transition so far?
I think one was that no one else in my family eats this way. I would say my mom is probably the one who most maybe comes closer to a plant-based, but in terms of having like committed to the whole food plant-based, my husband eats a standard American diet, as well as basically my friends and family. And so I think, which is why I definitely want to work with Carly, because I realized that I think I needed that extra support. So that was a challenge, not possible to overcome, but a challenge. And with that, having some of that food around in the home and making that, Carly and I talk about like having that distinction of like your food, my food, like this isn't mine, to try to delineate so I'm not as tempted by the other things in our fridge or pantry.
Yeah, but I also think we went through a big mindset transition where we had to focus on why are these things so rewarding and pleasurable? Like, let's start to shift to look at them as more of toxic and disease causing. Like these are not pleasurable, they're not rewarding, they are harmful. And it's just once you have that association with a food type product, you can't look at it the same. You're like, I know exactly what you do to me. Why would I want to put you in my body? And then, inadvertently my child. Speaking of which, while you were breastfeeding, I think it's important to mention that from that shift of being pregnant to following post-pregnancy and lactating, that we did increase your calories, but we didn't do it artificially. We did it with just more amounts of those high-calorie items of the plant foods, like the starches. And then we also increased the nuts, the avocado, the seeds, the coconut, if you really wanted coconut, those kinds of things. So there are ways to go about supplying a healthy milk supply to your child without adding a bunch of processed junk.
Yes.
Lactation cookies. How have you been able to navigate the social settings?
For me, it's been about being prepared, about anticipating, eating beforehand. For example, I had my baby shower while we were working together, and I forget what meal I had beforehand, but went to the shower very full. And although there were a few fruit items I think I could have had, I really just kind of sipped on water, and I was mostly socializing. So being prepared and not going places hungry, I think has been the biggest takeaway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have been very diligent about this whole process. But I also wrote that you do still dine out occasionally. Like it's going to happen. It's inevitable in our society. So you just go about finding the healthiest option available. And sometimes you have to bring your own things, and sometimes you have to ask for special things that aren't on the menu, and that's perfectly fine. People get so self-conscious about doing this in front of other people, but you should be proud of it, and you should really, know that you're on the right track and you're doing the right thing for your body. But you also communicate openly to your family and friends about your dietary needs and preferences, and in a very non-judgmental way, right? So you didn't say, oh, no, I don't eat that. You know, I eat this. It wasn't like I know better than you, or I'm in any way, shape, or form, you know, doing something that you're incapable of. It's just your choice. And your family was very much on board with what you were doing and very supportive, including your husband. Even though he's not completely on board, he's definitely eating better than he was prior.
Yes, he is. And yeah, it has been nice just having those frank conversations with mostly my parents and my husband, who I'm around the most, and them being, yeah, they've been all supportive.
Yeah, and your family helped you to stay on top of your meal prepping right after the right after the birth. That was wonderful to hear about. Not many families are that, you know, involved to that degree. Okay, so why do you think you were so successful in this endeavor? Like, what were the key actions that led to your success?
I guess going back to the preparation, kind of having a plan. You know, we met every week, and so thinking ahead of like having a meal plan, taking the time to shop and prep and have it available, as well as, you know, I learned a lot more. Although I had some knowledge about the whole food plant-based way of eating, I learned a lot, you know, through a book you had recommended, through, you know, different videos and just our conversations and your knowledge. Um, and the importance of staying kind of immersed in that plant-based community, especially not having one locally, was also really helpful. And I feel like putting an investment in the coaching is worth it too. It's like, okay, you know, I've got financial as well, you know, I'm putting money into this. And so like wanting to make sure I'm maximizing it and using the time well, and having the why. You know, we talked a lot about why, whether that was with the eating or like when we talked about strength training, you know, keeping that why at the forefront as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, those are exactly the notes that I wrote down for you for that question. That the consistency with your skills and your meal prepping, making healthy options readily accessible, just like what you were used to. Instead of reaching for the peanut butter and jelly, you were reaching for the oatmeal that had been made the day prior, or even, you know, a couple days prior. Always making sure to restock and having plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables, but also batch cooking was a big one for you. Knowing that you could cook multiple servings in one meal and not having to make something different 3 times a day every day. Most people have that idea when they go into this, thinking that they have to have this robust repertoire of all these different recipes. But in any diet, if you really think about it, you're only using about 10 to 13 recipes tops, just over and over and over, recycling them, and maybe in slightly differing alterations. And then the next aspect that made you so successful, I feel, is you dove in head first, Karen. You had 0 reservations or excuses. You were 100% whole food, plant-based, SOS-free, as much as you can be in this society. You learned to make enjoyable alternatives for yourself and your family. You improved your kitchen skills and your comfort level, even though you were very uncomfortable doing so. And the third thing is your ongoing plant-based nutrition education. This became a huge part of your success because you are now a knowledgeable consumer. You are an informed consumer. When you need to make a decision about something with your baby or with your own health, you go out and you research it to death until you find the best possible outcome, right? So what advice would you give to other mamas or soon-to-be mamas considering this transition to a whole food, plant-based lifestyle?
I would just say go for it. Like we mentioned, I didn't jump head first until 3rd trimester-ish. You know, would have been better if I had done it 1st trimester. Yes. Would have even better pre getting pregnant. Yes. But, you know, we can't change the past. All we can do is, you know, change what we're doing now and move forward. And advice to just not sit in the guilt, I guess, to move forward, or to use that to move forward. And then also recognize what support you need. You know, maybe you can make the change all on your own, but, you know, then again, maybe you need to get a friend or a family member or someone like Carly and just get the support. I'd say also get the support you need, and communicate what those needs are. Like we mentioned, my mom and my husband have been great of taking care of the baby so that I can do my food prep and go to the grocery store. And so that's important as well.
Hmm. So you see yourself doing this long term and teaching your
yeah,
baby everything you've learned?
definitely, yes.
Great.
And I feel like it's been helpful talking to you because you have a daughter, 3 years older. So I feel like I could like look ahead and kind of see, how exciting that is to look forward to having him eating plant-based as well.
Yes, and a lot of the recipes on my channel are for my daughter. So you can go ahead and utilize any of those anytime you need to. The muffins, the oatmeal, the smoothies, all that good stuff. Even her birthday cake is on there. The delicious vanilla bean frosting carrot cake. It is decadent. Stuffed with dates. You'll love it.
Oh, yeah. Make sure I don't eat it all.
Yeah, but I'm glad you mentioned that because my child has never required an antibiotic. She has never required a trip to the doctor's office for anything beyond her, well baby visits. And she is very well tempered. She's smart as a whip, and she is probably a little too smart for her own good. But we'll leave it at that. She is a very active child, and I couldn't have asked for anything more perfect. So I just want parents to know that allergies and food sensitivities and constipation. My daughter has never been constipated a day in her life. Those things are not normal. You don't have to live with it, and your child certainly does not have to live with it. So do what you need to do. If I know a lot of parents have a problem feeling like they're depriving their child if they don't give them the same pseudo foods that the rest of the children are eating. But think about it this way. Would you give your child a cigarette because the other children were smoking a cigarette after their meal? No. We don't think of that as deprivation. Why on earth do we think of restricting sodas and McDonald's and all of this junk food from our child as depriving them from this rite of passage that Americans get as children? It's so sad. When you go to a restaurant and you look at the menu and you see all of the child foods, the mac and cheese and probably the things you were eating when you first started working with me, the chicken nuggets and the fries, the burgers, these things, they're not food and they should definitely not be designated for children. Oh, okay, that's my rant. I know you have a wonderful baby to go take care of, so I will let you off the hook with our interview. I am very happy that you decided to do this with me because you're my first pregnant client that wanted to actually share their story with the world. So I really appreciate that, and I'm sure my viewers do too.
Well, thanks, Carly.
Best of luck to you and your family. I can't wait to hear updates.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye.